They say cancer humbles you, that it strips you bare, not just of your hair and your weight and your strength, but of the illusions too. And that's true. But what they don't tell you is how the people around you behave when they think you've been humbled. My name's Margaret. I'm 69 years old, a retired elementary school teacher from Michigan, and 6 months out of my final round of chemo. Triple-negative breast cancer. Aggressive, but I caught it early. That doesn't mean the battle didn't shake me. Did. I lost weight I didn't have to lose. I had mouth sores that made even oatmeal taste like nails, and yes, I lost most of my hair. Thin patches now cover what used to be thick, warm waves of chestnut with silver streaks. Used to be my pride. I kept it tied up in a low bun for most of my life, but every now and then, especially when my late husband Frank and I would go dancing, I'd let it out and feel, well, like me. But back to them. My son Daniel is 34. He married Alyssa 2 years ago in a small courthouse ceremony. COVID wedding. They'd planned to have a bigger celebration once things settled, and I was genuinely happy for them. She seemed ambitious, bright, overly curated in the way some people are, but pleasant enough. Always had some new diet, some new skincare serum, always talking about branding herself. You know the type. But I stayed in my lane. They were finally going to have their real wedding this July. A full garden ceremony at this overpriced little event space in Ann Arbor. She wanted roses everywhere. Live string quartet. Muted earth tones with champagne accents. I didn't know what that meant, but I was footing half the bill. Most of the vendors were booked under my name, because I was the only one with the credit and savings to do it without loans. Frank and I weren't wealthy, but we were responsible, and I had enough tucked away after his death for emergencies, and for family. That's what you do, right? Until last Saturday. I just come from a follow-up appointment. The oncologist said I was doing well, all things considered. My counts were decent, but I needed to keep resting. No heavy lifting, watch my stress, and for heaven's sake eat. I stopped by Daniel and Alyssa's place with a small Tupperware of chicken noodle soup. My recipe. Daniel always loved it when he was sick. I figured they'd be finalizing the wedding seating chart and I could lend a hand. I wasn't feeling great, but I missed them, and sometimes just being around family helps. That's what I thought. When I got there, Alyssa barely looked up from her laptop. She had one of those Pinterest boards open. Her face scrunched in that tight, judgmental little way. She was talking about the family photo schedule, how there'd be golden hour portraits after the ceremony, and who would stand where. I sat down quietly, not wanting to interrupt. Then she looked over at me. I still hear the words clearly. "Oh, Margaret, I meant to bring this up. The photographer said lighting picks up everything, especially for outdoor shots. And, well, I do think it'd be best if you cut your hair. We don't want you looking unkempt in the family wedding photos. Just like that. No softness. No, are you okay? No, how are you doing, by the way? Just snip snip, like I was a prop in her little aesthetic vision board. Like my illness, and everything it's done to my body and spirit, was just an inconvenience for her Kodak moment. I didn't say much. I just nodded and smiled. Well, whatever version of a smile I could muster while my stomach turned. Daniel glanced up briefly but didn't say anything. He just muttered something about how everyone wants to look their best. That night I went home, reheated my soup, and stared at my reflection for a good hour. Unkempt. Let me tell you something. That word rang louder than any diagnosis I've ever gotten. It wasn't about the hair. It was about everything underneath. That no matter what I'd sacrificed, no matter how I showed up, tired, sore, pale, but present, it didn't fit the curated wedding image Alyssa wanted. She wanted picture perfect. And I was just a blemish. I didn't cry. I don't cry much these days. I burn. Quietly. And as I sat there at my dining table with my thinning hair pulled back gently into a scarf, I remembered something. The catering. They'd booked it under my name. And fully plated service for 120 guests. $3,000 non-refundable deposit. I'd paid it up front back in February because Alyssa didn't want to downgrade the experience. So the next morning, while sipping a very bitter cup of black tea, I picked up the phone and called the caterer. "Hi," I said, voice calm, steady. "This is Margaret Lawson. I need to cancel the July 20th booking." The woman on the other end paused. "Oh, may I ask why?" "Personal reasons," I replied. "Family issues. I understand the deposit is non-refundable." "Yes, ma'am." "That's fine," I said. "Keep the deposit, but take my name off the contract. If they want to rebook, they can do so under their own credit." He paused again. "Of course, Ms. Lawson." And just like that, $3,000 worth of foie gras and mini caprese skewers vanished into thin air. I didn't tell anyone. Not yet. Because this wasn't about revenge. Not yet. It was about respect. About drawing the first line in the sand. And trust me, that was only the first. The thing about passive-aggressive people is, they never expect you to actually push back. Especially not the quiet ones. Especially not the sick ones. They rely on your silence, your politeness. And the moment you stop playing your assigned role, they start to unravel. 3 days passed after I cancelled the catering, and the silence was blissful. I spent the time repotting my succulents, finishing a jigsaw puzzle Frank never got to complete, and, more than anything, just breathing. No appointments. No bland sympathy smiles. No Alyssa with her air of curated concern. But then the calls started. First it was Daniel. Around 10 p.m. on a Wednesday, just as I'd settled into bed with my old heated blanket and a podcast. "Hey, Mom," he said, trying to sound casual. "Did the catering place call you or something? They said the booking was cancelled." Pause. "Yes," I said plainly. "I cancelled it." There was a beat of silence on his end, like he couldn't quite compute what I'd said. "Wait, what? Why?" "They booked under my name with my money. I decided to pull out." "Mom, we talked about this. You offered. And everything's already scheduled around that caterer." "No, Daniel. I agreed to help then. That was before your wife told me I shouldn't look unkempt in your wedding photos." He went quiet. Then the defensiveness started crawling into his voice like it always does when he doesn't want to admit something's wrong. "I think you're overreacting. Alyssa was just trying to help. It's a photo-heavy event. You know how things get misinterpreted." Cut in calmly. She wasn't misinterpreted. She was crystal clear. I could hear him breathing on the line, like he was trying to keep it together. "You didn't even give us a heads up, Mom. That's not fair." I let out a breath. "Neither is being told I'm an eyesore for your wedding." He hung up shortly after, saying we'd talk later when things cooled down. But I knew that voice. It wasn't heat. It was fear. He knew what it meant when I got quiet. And oh, bless her, Alyssa reached out 2 days later with one of those long, sugary texts that feel like they were drafted by a publicist. "Hi, Margaret. Just circling back to clarify, there was absolutely no offense intended. The hair comment, I just meant it would look more polished for photos, but of course it's totally your decision. We're still so excited for you to be part of the big day. Let me know if there's any way we can make you feel more comfortable. Zoxo bride vibes." I read it 3 times, blinked slowly, and didn't respond. "'Cause no, Alyssa. You don't get to slap a bride vibes on casual cruelty and call it charm." That Saturday, I drove to the venue for the site visit Alyssa had invited me to weeks earlier. I hadn't cancelled, because I was curious what her face would look like when she realized I wasn't the same woman who quietly handed over checks and kept to the edges. She was already there, pacing in her cream yoga set, talking to someone on Bluetooth, probably rescheduling a lash appointment. "Oh, hi," she said with that fake, breathy voice reserved for guests or prospective sponsors. "Hello," I smiled. We walked the grounds while she went on about floral arches and ethereal lighting. Then we reached the reception tent. The planner asked about finalizing catering placement. "Oh," Alyssa said, and I could almost see her throat bob. "We're actually confirming a new caterer. There was, a change with our original setup." She glanced at me quickly, then added, "Just a misunderstanding." The planner blinked. "Do you have the new vendor's info?" Alyssa stammered. "We're narrowing it down this weekend." I kept my eyes on the garden bed, pretending to examine the peonies. But inside I smiled. Because here's the truth. She wasn't scrambling because of food. She was scrambling because, for once, she wasn't in control. That night, I sat by Frank's photo. I talked to him sometimes. I know it sounds silly. But when you've been with someone for 42 years, silence doesn't feel empty anymore. Feels full. Like he's listening. I did what you would have done, I whispered. Or at least what you'd have wanted to do but let me handle in my own way. You see, Frank never liked Alyssa. Said she had veneer warmth. And that Daniel's trying to impress someone who doesn't even like who he is. Think he was right. Daniel had changed so much since meeting her. Apologizing for me bringing deviled eggs to their last barbecue. Asking me not to post old pictures of him from high school, because Alyssa's brand is more modern. I'd brushed it off then. Now I saw it more clearly. But canceling the catering. That wasn't revenge. It was a wake-up call. One Alyssa was just starting to hear ringing in her ears. And if she thought that was the last of my surprises, well, she clearly didn't know who she was dealing with. You'd think canceling the catering would be the straw that broke the wedding camel's back. But no. With people like Alyssa, it's never just one thing. No, it's death by 1,000 perfectly timed Pinterest pins. A week after the venue visit, I got a group email from Alyssa titled, Mother of the Groom Dress Guidelines. Guidelines. For a dress. The email had bullet points, links, and a full color palette. Apparently, champagne gold and dove beige were the only acceptable tones for mothers. Oh, and nothing below the calf, nothing sleeveless, even if you had the arms for it, and no sequins. God forbid we sparkle more than the bride. Then, toward the end, this line. Given Margaret's more mature complexion and recent health journey, we suggest a soft wrap or light shawl to keep things elegant but modest. My blood didn't boil. Not anymore. I was past that. I just sat there and stared at the screen, then reread the line again, slowly. She didn't say it to my face this time. No, she outsourced the insult to email, masked with emojis and faux graciousness. So I did what any self-respecting woman would do. I ordered a midnight blue floor-length gown, sleeveless, with sequins from neckline to hem. When it arrived, I tried it on in front of my full-length mirror and laughed. I looked like a disco ball who'd survived a war. But I stood taller in that moment than I had in months. Because it was the first time in a long time that I dressed like I was still here, not hiding under scarves or apologies. That was the second thing I did. The third was the dress boutique. You see, Alyssa's wedding dress was custom-made. She bragged about it endlessly. Hand-beaded lace, Italian tulle, a one-of-a-kind silhouette. It was her baby. The boutique she got it from. Also under my name. Because she didn't have enough credit history to put down the $1,200 deposit. At the time it felt harmless. She begged me, swore Daniel would pay me back. We'll transfer the money by the end of the month, she said. That was last October. So I called the boutique. Hi, this is Margaret Lawson. I'm calling about the custom bridal gown ordered under my name. Yes, of course, the woman said. Everything is on track for your final payment this month. Smiled. Well, actually, I'm not moving forward with the order. That card should have never been used in the first place. Can you cancel it? There was a pause. You understand there's a non-refundable deposit. Oh, I'm well aware. And you can keep it. But please cancel the gown. That's my final decision. Click. I didn't even have to tell Alyssa. Word travels fast in wedding circles. 2 days later, she showed up at my doorstep. Now, let me set this scene for you clearly. Alyssa doesn't do surprise visits. She barely comes over when invited. But there she was, standing on my porch in overpriced sneakers, sunglasses the size of saucers, and her signature fake smile. Margaret, hi. I hope I'm not intruding. Just wanted to chat woman to woman. I stepped aside. By all means. She didn't sit. Just hovered in the living room like she was allergic to upholstery. Oh. I heard about the dress situation, she said, tilting her head, like she was speaking to a confused toddler. And I just wanted to say, I totally get it. You're under a lot of stress, and weddings can feel overwhelming. She trailed off, expecting me to jump in. I didn't. Then she pulled out her final weapon, concern. I just want to make sure you're okay, she cooed. You've been acting different. Not yourself. And we're starting to worry you might be struggling with, some post-treatment mood swings. I couldn't help it, I laughed. A dry, sharp laugh that came from my gut. 'Cause there it was. The real play. She was trying to frame my boundaries as a mental episode. Like standing up for myself was just a side effect. Let me stop you right there, I said, voice calm. You don't need to worry about my mood. You need to worry about your entitlement. Her face changed. The mask slipped for just a second. Then she regrouped. Well, she said, standing straighter, we might need to reconsider your role in the wedding if this continues. I smiled sweetly. You should. In fact, why don't you go ahead and take me off the guest list? Save yourself the trouble. She blinked. Excuse me. I'm disinviting myself, I said. I wouldn't want to look unkempt in your photos, remember? The silence was thick. She turned and left without another word. Not even a fake goodbye. Later that evening, Daniel called. His voice was flat. Tired. You didn't need to go this far, Mom. No, I said. I didn't. But I chose to. She's just stressed. So am I, Daniel. I survived cancer. I lost your father. And now I'm apparently not polished enough for your wedding. But this isn't about the dress. Or the food. Or the hair. It's about how invisible I became the second she started planning this thing. He didn't argue. Instead, he whispered, I don't know what to do anymore. And there was the real crack. Because Daniel wasn't the confident man I'd raised anymore. He was buckling under someone else's vision, someone else's script. And the worst part, he knew it. I'll tell you what to do, I said softly. Look in the mirror. Ask yourself whose wedding this is. Then I hung up. I wasn't going to the wedding. That much was clear. But what came next? Alyssa had no idea the kind of mother she'd awakened. Because I had one more thing in my back pocket. Something she and Daniel had no clue about. Something that would make all the sequins and catering and dress drama feel like child's play. When people start treating you like you're irrelevant, like a little old lady with thinning hair and nothing left to contribute, it's easy for them to forget who you really are. But I wasn't always Margaret, the widow, or Margaret, the cancer patient. I was Margaret Lawson, head of the PTA, school curriculum coordinator, savings account magician, and woman who once filed her own taxes by hand when our accountant messed up. I didn't survive 42 years of marriage and a double mastectomy by being meek. So when Alyssa walked out my door that day, after trying to gaslight me with concern, I poured myself a glass of iced tea, grabbed my file folder from the cabinet labeled Wedding, and laid it all out. Bank statements, deposit receipts, contracts. Because here's the thing Alyssa and Daniel forgot in all their "we want this and you offered that." Every dime I'd put toward this wedding came from my account. I didn't gift it. I loaned it. And I had it all in writing. See, back in October, right after Alyssa pitched me her elevated rustic chic wedding vision, I said, I'm willing to help fund this if we make it clear what's a gift and what's a loan. For everyone's peace of mind. Daniel nodded like the reasonable son I raised. I handed him a simple agreement, something my lawyer friend Patty had drafted for me. 1 page, nothing fancy. Just a clear statement that the $7,500 I was covering would be reimbursed within 6 months of the wedding. The only part that was a gift was the dress deposit. $1,200. The rest, loan. Daniel signed it. Alyssa was in the kitchen with her smoothie blender and didn't even glance at the paper. Probably thought it was just a formality. But I filed that thing away. With signatures and a copy of the email chain where we confirmed the details. And now, with the wedding less than a month away, I had a very clear decision to make. Call in the loan. I waited 2 days. Then I sent a certified letter. Not a text. Not an email. A certified letter. Formal as a courtroom summons. It was addressed to Daniel, but I knew Alyssa would open it first. Inside. Dear Daniel, in light of recent developments, I am officially requesting repayment of the $6,300 wedding loan per our agreement dated October 12. Given the cancellation of services previously paid under my name, the amount now due is $4,100. Please remit payment in full no later than July 15th. Sincerely, Mom, Margaret Lawson. I figured they'd ignore it, or call in a panic. Instead, I got a knock at my door the next evening, this time from Daniel. Alone. He looked tired, ill, like a man who hadn't had a full night's sleep in weeks. Can I come in? He asked. I nodded, and we sat at the kitchen table like old times. He didn't touch the tea I offered, just stared down at the letter he'd crumpled in his fist. Mom, why are you doing this? He asked. I looked at him, really looked. My boy. My only child. The one I used to rock to sleep with lullabies and peanut butter on his nose. I'm doing this, I said gently, because I need you to understand that love doesn't mean being used. He shook his head, frustrated. But it's money. I thought. No, I said. You didn't think. You let someone else think for you. And you let her turn this into a stage show where I was the extra. The funding. Photobomb. I agreed to help you two start your life. Not bankroll a vanity pageant. I didn't mean to. But you did, I cut in. By standing by. By not defending me when I was dismissed. By acting like I was a burden. You let her call me unkempt, Daniel. He looked down, shame washing over his face. She's not a bad person, Mom. She just gets caught up. She doesn't have to be bad to be wrong. He was quiet for a long time. Then finally, what if I can't pay it back right now? Then say that, I said. Be a man. Own your mistake. Don't pretend this didn't happen. He nodded slowly. I'll figure it out. I reached out, touched his hand. I don't want to hurt you. But I also won't let myself be treated like a side note in my own life. 3 days later I got a call from Patty, my lawyer friend. You'll never guess what just happened, she said, chuckling. Turns out Alyssa called her. Screaming. Accused me of being spiteful, jealous, and emotionally manipulative. Said she was considering a restraining order if I showed up to the wedding, even uninvited. Patty, bless her, calmly reminded Alyssa that I'd broken no laws. And then she said the part that made me nearly spill my coffee. She told me, Margaret's ruining everything. This is my moment. Her moment. Not their moment. Not a family gathering. Her moment. That's when I realized something even deeper than I expected. Alyssa didn't just dislike me. She resented me. She resented my presence. My illness. My history with Daniel. Everything I represented. Because I reminded her that she hadn't built Daniel from scratch. She just painted over him. So I stayed quiet. Let them stew. But behind the scenes, I made one more phone call. Not to a lawyer. Not to a friend. To someone she had no idea I knew. And what that woman told me. Let's just say Alyssa's little bridal empire had a few cracks in the foundation. And I wasn't above letting the light in. There's a little saying I used to repeat to my second graders. The truth has legs. It always gets where it needs to go. I'd usually say it when someone was lying about who colored on the bulletin board or who left their lunch in the cubby. But let me tell you something, it applies to adults just the same. Especially adults who think they're slicker than they are. Now, let me take you back to a month before Alyssa showed up at my door to chastise me for confusing boundaries with bitterness. That's how she phrased it in a voicemail, by the way. Real therapy speak, weaponized. At that time I got a phone call from a young woman named Chloe. Sweet girl. Worked part-time at the flower shop I frequent. She also happened to be one of Alyssa's former bridesmaids. Note former. Chloe and I had exchanged a few pleasantries over tulip stems and dried eucalyptus in the past, but nothing personal. So when she asked if I had a moment to talk, off the record, just woman to woman, I knew something juicy was coming. She hesitated at first. I just didn't feel right keeping quiet anymore, she said. I know you've always seemed kind. You came in even during treatment, always tipped us generously. Well, Alyssa's not who she pretends to be. Color me unshocked. She told me she'd stepped down from the bridal party 2 weeks earlier. Alyssa had berated her in public for suggesting they tone down the wedding registry, which included things like a $900 espresso machine and a donation fund to send Alyssa and Daniel to a private wellness retreat in Tulum. But that's not the part you need to hear, Chloe said. It's about the wedding expenses. And you. My back straightened. Go on. Apparently, Alyssa had applied for a credit card under my name. Let that sink in. Chloe overheard her bragging during a wine night. Margaret's probably too tired to notice. It's not like she uses online banking anyway. She went on to explain how Alyssa used a mailing address tied to their house, one where I'd forwarded a couple of utilities after Frank passed. She'd answered security questions using tidbits Daniel had shared innocently over dinner. My maiden name, the street I grew up on, my first dog's name. Casual trivia to him. Ammunition to her. Did she actually charge anything? I asked, heart pounding. Chloe hesitated. I think the dress. After you cancelled it. She reordered it from another boutique. Paid a rush fee. I sat there in stunned silence, staring out my window. I watched a squirrel dart across my front yard like it was on some urgent mission. And I realized, I had been quiet too long. The next morning I did 3 things. Checked my credit report. There it was. A new card under M.E. Lawson with 2 flagged charges. $2,300 for a bridal boutique, and $450 at a spa. Called the bank's fraud department. They were surprisingly efficient. Confirmed I hadn't opened the card. Said I'd need to file a police report to fully dispute the charges and freeze the card. Called Patty, my lawyer friend. Again. Sweet Jesus, she muttered. She's that stupid. Apparently, I said calmly. Patty helped me draft the paperwork. We didn't file criminal charges just yet, but we did issue a formal demand letter to Alyssa's address, informing her the credit card had been flagged for identity theft, and if she didn't resolve it with the bank in 7 days, we'd pursue legal action. No yelling. No grand confrontation. Just paperwork. Because, my dear, when you've survived chemo, buried the love of your life, and clawed your way back from despair, there's a certain peace in going the slow, steady legal route. Alyssa didn't respond. But Daniel did. This time he didn't call. He showed up. He stood at my door, hat in hand. Well, metaphorically. In reality, he looked like someone who hadn't slept in days. Eyes bloodshot, jaw tight. My Daniel. The boy who once cried because his pet turtle died in 2nd grade. Mom, he said, standing in my doorway. I didn't know. I let him in. Made coffee. Sat in silence while he paced. She swore it was your idea to open the card. That you gave her the info. That you were just forgetful. Does that sound like me? I asked quietly. He didn't answer. 'Cause the answer hurt. I feel like I don't recognize her anymore, he said finally. I mean, I thought she just cared too much about appearances. But this is theft. And I let her. I placed a hand on his arm. You didn't let her. You trusted her. That's different. He sniffed. I think I need to make some serious decisions. I didn't push him. I didn't gloat or say I told you so. I just nodded. I'll be here when you do. 2 days later, Alyssa finally texted me. This is getting out of hand. You're blowing things up to make yourself look good. You've always hated me. You want Daniel to yourself. This is why we didn't want you in the photos. That last sentence. That sealed her fate. It wasn't about me looking unkempt. It was about erasing me entirely. So I did the one thing she never expected. I RSVP'd yes to the wedding. 'Cause I was going to show up. But not as the woman she'd cast as old, tired, and in the way. No. I had one final appearance to make. And if she thought the catering and credit card were my biggest moves, she hadn't seen anything yet. There's something about walking into a room where people weren't expecting you, especially when they've written you off, That's delicious in a way only age and survival can teach you to savor. I hadn't been in a dress in over a year. And yet there I was, hair trimmed and fluffed the best it could be, my midnight blue gown glistening with sequins, and a soft ivory shawl draped over my shoulders, not to cover myself but to float like a cape. I wasn't just arriving. I was making an entrance. The wedding was held in a rented garden space in Ann Arbor. The same one where Alyssa had rolled her eyes at me weeks earlier. The same one where she had planned her grand vision of muted tones, soft florals, and a carefully curated guest list. I was not on that list anymore. But I came anyway. And not alone. You see, a week before the wedding I made another call, to Mary Beth. Mary Beth is Daniel's godmother. My late husband Frank's cousin. She's sharp, southern, and owns more pearls than the Queen of England did in her prime. Mary Beth doesn't believe in staying out of it when something smells fishy, and bless her for that. I told her everything. Every single thing. The catering. The dress. The fraud. The insult. Even the credit card stunt. She didn't even wait for me to finish. "I'm coming with you," she said. "That girl's had her moment. It's time you had yours." So on the day of the wedding, Mary Beth picked me up in her Lincoln, played Aretha Franklin the entire drive, and when we pulled into that venue's gravel parking lot, she said, "Fix your posture, honey. They're not ready." And they weren't. When we stepped through the garden gates, everything slowed. I could feel the air shift, like a quiet gasp rippled through the guests. The bridesmaids looked like pastel mannequins, eyes wide and twitchy. One of them elbowed another and whispered something behind a fake smile. The string quartet screeched to a pause mid-note. I'm not exaggerating, they literally stopped playing. Alyssa's mother, Dolores or Diane or something equally cold, rushed over with the kind of smile you give to someone you hope will evaporate. "Oh, Margaret. I wasn't aware you would be attending," she said, trying to block the view of my dress with her clipboard. I leaned in. "Surprise." She blinked. "And I brought a friend," I added, motioning to Mary Beth, who looked ready to throw down with anyone who so much as raised a passive-aggressive eyebrow. We walked in. And that's when I saw Daniel. He was standing up near the altar with the officiant, straightening his cuffs. When he saw me, he froze. Then his eyes, red, tired, uncertain, locked with mine. I nodded once. He gave the tiniest nod back. A flicker of something passed between us. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But recognition. And then Alyssa appeared. She came gliding down the stone path like a swan that smelled fire. Her face was made up to perfection. Highlighted, contoured, powdered within an inch of its life. But her eyes gave her away. She saw me standing there in that gown, with Mary Beth by my side, and her mouth tightened just a hair. She didn't stop walking. Didn't cause a scene. But as she reached the altar, she leaned over and whispered something into Daniel's ear. I saw it. I saw his jaw clench. Then he stepped back. Just one small step. The officiant cleared his throat. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are gathered here today." The ceremony dragged on in a haze of half-meant words. I watched it like I was watching someone else's play. Beautiful costumes, hollow lines. Until the vows. When it was time for Alyssa to speak, she launched into some over-rehearsed monologue about authenticity and building dreams together and never letting outsiders come between what was destined. She didn't look at Daniel when she said it. She looked at me. She thought she was making a point. But she had no idea what was about to hit her. Because Daniel didn't read his vows. He held the card, glanced down at it, and then tucked it back in his jacket. And then he looked up at the crowd, at me, and said loud and clear, "I can't do this." The silence was deafening. I mean, you could hear a fly do a three-point landing on a champagne flute. Alyssa stared at him, blinking like she'd been slapped. "What?" she whispered, voice shrill and cracking. "I can't," he repeated. "I've lied to myself too long. I let too many people get hurt trying to make this work. Daniel, don't do this now. Not here." Her voice was shaking. "Do not embarrass me." He took a deep breath and said something I'll never forget. This isn't about embarrassment. This is about finally having a spine. The crowd erupted. Murmurs, gasps, a few cameras dropping. Someone's drunk uncle actually clapped. Daniel walked off the altar and came toward me. Straight to me. He didn't say anything. He just wrapped his arms around me. Hugged me for the first time in what felt like a year. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry." And I believed him. Not just because he said it, but because for the first time since he met Alyssa, he looked like himself again. Alyssa. She stood there, frozen like a statue with a perfect spray tan. She didn't cry. Didn't scream. She just looked around and realized something she never expected. This day wasn't hers anymore. Never really was. She didn't just lose a groom. She lost her audience. And me. I wasn't unkempt. I wasn't bitter. I wasn't in the background. I was center stage, and I hadn't even meant to be. They say weddings bring people together. But sometimes, they expose everything that's been pulling them apart. The day after Daniel walked off the altar, he came to my house with his shoulders squared and his voice steady. The man I raised was back, not the shrinking version of himself Alyssa had hollowed out with her brand building and image control. He sat across from me at my dining table, the same table where I once helped him color inside the lines, the same one where Frank taught him how to fold bills into tiny origami frogs. In front of him was the sealed envelope I'd prepared months earlier. I didn't want to use it unless I had to. But now, he needed to see it. He opened it slowly. Inside were 3 things. The credit card statement with charges Alyssa had made under my name. A total of $3,812.97 from a boutique, a spa, a photographer's VIP upgrade, and oddly a bachelorette party planning service. Screenshots Chloe had quietly sent me from group chats Alyssa was in, mocking me, mocking Daniel, even referring to our family as aesthetically incompatible with her vision. A typed statement from the bank investigator confirming the card had been fraudulently opened in my name. Daniel didn't say much. He just flipped through the pages slowly. Eyes red again. Not from confusion this time, but clarity. The kind that hurts. "I didn't know," he whispered. "I believe you," I said. He sat back, closed the envelope and said, "I need to call a lawyer." Over the next few weeks, things moved fast. Daniel contacted the bank and filed a fraud report. Alyssa tried to delay the investigation by claiming I had given her verbal permission. But the burden of proof wasn't on me, and the paper trail made it clear she was lying. Daniel also filed for an annulment, citing fraud and financial misconduct. Turns out, a wedding ceremony that doesn't end in a marriage certificate is a lot easier to unravel. Alyssa's family. They tried to do damage control, of course. Claimed I had sabotaged everything out of jealousy and grief. Said I was an overbearing widow clinging to her only child. I didn't respond to any of it. I didn't need to. Because the truth had legs, remember? And it had arrived. The week everything was finalized, Daniel came over again. This time not as a broken groom, but a man who'd reclaimed his voice. We sat outside on my back porch with sweet tea and a breeze that felt like freedom. He turned to me and said, "I let her take so much control because I thought it was easier than saying no. I thought she'd change once we were married." He nodded. "We all make that mistake in some form or another." He looked at me for a long moment. "You forgave me too quickly," he said. Smiled. "That wasn't forgiveness. That was just grace. The forgiveness came after you took responsibility." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a check. Slid it across the table. "I sold the honeymoon package and a few other things. Paid off what I owe you, every dime." I looked down at the check. $4,100. Right to the cent. I folded it and tucked it into my purse without a word. Because it wasn't about the money anymore. It was about the respect. Life started to feel normal again, in a way I hadn't felt in a long time. No more wedding drama. No more manipulation. No more pretending to be the weak one just to keep peace. I joined a cancer survivors hiking group. Started volunteering at the library again. I even let Mary Beth drag me to a wine and paint class, where I ended up accidentally painting a duck instead of the sunflower we were supposed to do. Still hangs in my laundry room. And Daniel, he moved into a new apartment, started therapy, reconnected with old friends Alyssa had quietly pushed out of his life. We talk more now, about real things, not just logistics and weather. Sometimes healing doesn't come in the big moments. Sometimes it comes in a quiet porch conversation over tea, when you realize your child, your baby, has grown up the right way finally. And Alyssa, last I heard, she tried to rebrand herself as a wedding wellness coach. She's still on Instagram, still preaching boundaries and detoxing your life, though ironically enough she's blocked me. But every now and then I get messages from people who were at the wedding, or heard about what happened. They thank me for standing my ground, for not letting age, illness, or grief turn me into a doormat. Because that's the lie people tell about women like me. That once our hair grays or thins or fades, we fade too. But we don't. We shine in new ways. We speak more clearly. We cut the fat from our lives and keep only the things that matter. Like dignity, like truth, and like the right to show up, in sequins and strength, and remind the world. We're not done yet.